All right, I'm gonna mute everybody, I think. Possibly. All right. Great. All right. Welcome, everybody. A lot of you here for the past 3 weeks or so, and possibly just a little bit less, but that is all good. We hope that you're finding the information useful. We welcome you to this one. This is going to be our last seminar for a couple of weeks. After this, we're going to go ahead and do some practical stuff and do some workouts and allow everybody an opportunity for some training with some coaches' eyes and just kind of see how everything goes. And that'll be the following 2 Thursdays. Today, we're going to cover the press and just some helpful stuff Roger's put together for us. And then if everybody has a bell, we'll go over a few things. Just some simple stuff that you may have overlooked or may be more beneficial to you. And then you'll have an opportunity to practice your skills a bit over the week and then reconvene next week and we'll see what everybody has. If you have any questions during this, there'll be breaks at the end of each little segment where you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away or just drop them in the chat and I'll address them. Otherwise, again, this is just a little bit about the press and we thank you. And if you do feel so inclined, you can donate at the end. Just let me know. If not, it's all good too. We're just happy you're here learning in this super, super awesome Thursday. All right, Roger, take it away, buddy.
What are we talking about again?
The press.
Oh yeah, okay. So let me share my screen because I have slides. All right, so this is kind of like we dove in with let me move everyone's face out of my way. Kind of like we dove in with the swing. This is meant to be a little more intermediate. Everybody should have some experience with, everyone should have some experience with press. It'll be a little looser. I'm down in my gym here just in case I need to demonstrate some stuff. Some of these concepts may be a little bit more clear if I demonstrate. So if anybody needs a demonstration, let me know and I may do that. If I get the feeling that people are just telling me to do shit because you want to see me move, then I probably will not cooperate, as is my nature. So some of the concepts we're really looking at with the press, we're shifting gears, so we've got a grind lift as opposed to a ballistic. Biomechanics are going to be important, but we're really looking at positioning. Primary points where we're going to have be able to affect our positioning are going to be our feet and our hands. That's really kind of commonsensical stuff, but we really have to look at 3 different planes of motion or three different types of orientation if we're gonna maximize our press. So we're gonna look at our vertical orientation, which is really gonna get us a lot of sagittal plane movement. We're gonna look at transverse, the actual motion of the bell. And then we're gonna get into lateral orientation. We're gonna get into the concept of wedging, which some of you may have experience with, some of you don't. That'll probably be the most complicated concept, but we at least want to introduce it to you so you get some familiarity with that. So first thing, I feel the need to say this, even for very, very advanced things. Pack the shoulder is probably the only cue that I think is bad. And I think it's bad because it doesn't give any real reliable information most of the time. Sometimes it's appropriate. I think more often than not, it is not appropriate. And the biggest issue with packing the shoulder is semantic, and nobody really knows what it means. And what usually ends up happening when you are told to pack your shoulder is that you glue your shoulder blade down and back. Problem with that is it needs to move if you're going to press. So if you look at the little arrows On the left, the red ones, that's going to be a very crude depiction. I didn't have enough time to do more fancy stuff, but that's going to be a crude depiction of the scapula. So if you look at my little pointer here, the scap is right there. This is going to be the arm moving overhead. As the arm goes overhead, obviously that is very exaggerated. If this shoulder blade stays down while that arm goes up, you can see that there's going to be a separation here. What should happen is this should rotate up, as you're going to see in a second. But basically, if we are encouraging this down and back shoulder blade position while we're bringing the arm overhead, we're really asking for bad things to happen. For your anatomy to work normally, properly, your shoulder blade should rotate up, as in the pictures on the right. So if you look, now you have this, again, this is not exactly how it looks, but this just gives you a general idea. If you look at the orientation now, you have a direct line of the scapula with the humerus, and you're in a much more stable place. So that's the first thing. Again, even with very advanced practitioners, people are trying to push overhead while they're trying to keep their shoulder blades glued down and back. It does not work. That is not how your body works. This is not anything controversial. This is very, very basic anatomy. It's just a lot of times nobody really calls this stuff out. So really important. Any questions or anyone want to argue about that? Sometimes people like to argue. No? Are we good? Oh, Jeremiah, you're talking, but you're on mute. I can't hear you.
That's right. Sorry. No, I think we're good. I think that's a solid point though, Roger. So carry on, sir.
Oh, okay. So we've got Kettlebell back again. This time he's pressing and he has some new shoes. So what we're looking at in this photo, a few things we want to keep in mind. We've got that red circle down there. That's going to be his base of support. Okay, that's basically the area underneath him where he can't support himself. The wider his stance, the wider that circle is going to be. Again, very basic concepts, but you need to keep these in mind when you're setting up. Okay, this little gold thing right around here, that's going to be his center of gravity. He wants to keep that as close to the center of that red circle as possible. The green line or the green arrow here is a depiction of gravity. We always want to consider that. So if we look at his orientation, he's got gravity coming straight down on him. He's pretty well centered in his base of support. And these red lines here are looking at the lever length. So the lever length is basically going to be the perpendicular distance here. So basically, if his arm were way out here and this kettlebell were over here, he's going to have a longer lever. That's going to get more difficult to lift overhead. We went over some of these concepts with the swing. Same thing here, a little bit different. The rotation works a little different, how force generation works. But when you are setting up for your press, you need to consider gravity. In what ways is gravity affecting your body? And just remember, the farther out to the sides your arms are, the harder you are making your press. You are not giving yourself a mechanical advantage. You're making it more difficult because you are increasing the lever arm, and you're also taking your strength away from your base of support, which is going to make you weaker, not stronger. Okay. So when we're looking at the vertical orientation of the press, you want to have a stance that is going to allow you to push your body in between the bell and the ground. It's kind of a weird concept when a lot of people set up the press, at least with the regular press. They don't really understand this notion of using your entire body. The press is an entire body move. You should be using everything. And your goal is to really drive yourself in between the bell and the ground. And it seems like kind of a silly distinction, and it may not mean anything right away, but the better you get at it, the more you can generate stiffness. You're going to find that that's going to help you quite a bit. It's also going to solidify these concepts of the support for the kettlebell coming up from the ground up. Again, we usually are just focusing on the arm or the shoulder and pushing straight up. That's just not how a kettlebell press works. Okay, so we want to make sure that the base of support is underneath the bell. The main things we want to focus on if we're doing video, if we're observing ourselves or someone else, let's say using a mirror, We want to make sure that we're using compression as opposed to tension. The idea of compression is that you have elements stacked one on the other, and if everything is stacked, the compressive forces are going to be easier to maintain. If things are not stacked well, you're going to need tension from your muscles. So basically, rather than everything being stacked and pushing directly up, you are going to have muscles that are actively pulling and trying to keep you in place. It's going to be a weaker position. It's going to use more energy. You do need to realize that for these things to happen, your stance for the clean is probably not going to be the same as it will be for your press. Okay, very common. We see people who will set up for, they get a pretty decent clean, everything is good in their press, but their stance is too wide. When your stance is too wide, you don't have your feet underneath your shoulders, and that again, you're looking at the vertical line between your shoulder and your hip. So when you're setting up, make sure that your clean stance is going to is going to move probably. If it doesn't, that's cool, but for most people it does. Just make sure your stance is able to accommodate your press. And what we're looking for is just a straight line, the hip underneath the kettlebell, not necessarily under the shoulder. As we get into presentation a little bit, we'll see how that changes a bit. But the bottom line is you want to keep the kettlebell over your hip, and your stance may need to change in order to do that. You're also going to want to minimize your lever arm as much as possible. So again, the farther out my arm is. So right now I've got my arm in a pretty stacked position, if you guys can see this here, and gravity is coming straight down here. So I only have a little bit of motion, a little bit of perpendicular distance between my center here and where this arm is. When I bring it out here, suddenly I have all of this length that gravity is going to be able to manipulate. It's going to make my press a lot harder. Okay, so those are really our vertical considerations. Nothing too crazy, but a lot of these checkpoints people miss entirely. Any questions on any of that? Okay, we're good there. Okay, so kettlebells want to twist when you put them, when you put them in your arm. When you look at how the weight is distributed, when a kettlebell gets in an arm, that's usually the path it wants to go. It's going to want to either twist in or it's going to want to twist out. And you want to consider that natural tendency. You want to consider that natural tendency to twist, because it's actually going to help you press the bell if you use it to your advantage rather than your disadvantage. One thing that people don't often pick up on with a kettlebell press is they're just focusing on their hand. They're focusing on the handle here. The kettlebell, let's say I want, and I can stand up and demonstrate this if it helps, but the kettlebell is going to be in the hand. The handle is going to rest on your palm, but you also are going to have the weight of the bell on your forearm, okay? And a lot of people are pushing straight up here. They're not pushing with their forearm out here, okay? If I've got a kettlebell here, again, it wants to do this or it wants to do that. If I've got a kettlebell that wants to do this, I'm gonna push with my forearm and I'm gonna use that motion, okay? As we get down to that last point, when you get into biomechanics, the idea of inertia is that objects want to maintain their current state. So an object that's already moving is going to be easier to move. So if you have a kettlebell that wants to twist out and you're pushing up as you're pushing out, you're utilizing you're utilizing physics, and you're going to be pushing out as you push up. It's going to make your press a little bit easier, okay? That's the last point. The second point is your press should make a bit of a C shape, okay? You're not going to come straight up here. You're going to crouch yourself. As you come in, one, you don't have natural joint motion, but you're actually going to come in toward the center of your body. You're not going to be able to keep the kettlebell over your hip. Okay, that kettlebell has mass, and it wants to twist. So allow that C shape. Allow that C shape as you go overhead. Okay. Any questions on that? Are we good there? Do I need to demonstrate any of this stuff, or does this seem pretty straightforward? Jeremiah's going to do some demonstrating after for sure, but if we need to go over the stuff or if it needs to be clarified, let me know. All right. Was that a question, Phil?
Unmute yourself, Phil, if you got that question.
Oh, sorry, technology. Just to clarify what you're talking about with pushing the bell with your forearm. So as you have it midline, you're just kind of using it almost as a fulcrum to kind of get the initial inertia of the bell forward. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is the bell, hold on, let me go ahead and I'm actually going to switch camera views here. I'm going to switch camera views and I'm going to show you. If my audio drops off, let me know. Can you hear me? Thumbs up, somebody?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at the way, the kettlebell's resting, okay, you've obviously got the handle in your hand here. You have a point of contact here. A lot of people completely neglect that point of contact here, and they're just trying to push up. So if you have the option to influence a mass, a body, then you want to use all the points of contact possible. When you look at transfer of force from one body to another body, the surface area, the mass that you use actually matters. So when I have more of my body mass in contact with the bell, I'm going to be able to impart more force. So the fulcrum's not going to change. It's going to shift a little bit depending upon where I'm pushing. It's going to bring it closer rather than way up here. So that will change a little bit, but this is more about maintaining more contact with the kettlebell. And again, we want to take advantage of the concepts of inertia. If you hold a kettlebell up, if anybody's held one up of any weight and you just kind of relax, it either does that or it does that. So if that kettlebell is pushing out already, then I want to maintain that contact, keep more of my mass in contact with the kettlebell, and I'm going to push in a circle rather than trying to power it straight up like a dumbbell.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Following.
All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, let's see how I'm going to do this damn thing again. All right. So that's really how we're working more with the transverse plane. So I made this handy dandy little chart. Oh man, I forgot to fix my camera. Oh well, you guys are gonna stare at the top of my head for a while, so I feel like fucking with it. I shaved today, so it's nice and shiny. So hey, if you look at all of the different circles here, these different circles are going to represent different size kettlebells. So you see the red one, the green line there, the green arrow is going to represent an arm, and you see where they are in contact with the forearm. Okay, so that's kind of the concept that I just demonstrated. So this would be like, let's say, a little baby, 12 kilo kettlebell all the way up to something like a 48, whatever. But notice as the center of this bell would be right about here. So this is the point that you're going to want to keep over your hip. Okay. But as the bell gets bigger, this purple spot's probably going to be right around the center of this giant kettlebell over here, the big blue one. So you can see the center mass is actually shifting out. It's shifting away from the hip. And this can be a little confusing with people, especially with trainers, when they get into this whole, your motion has to be perfect and it has to be in a nice straight line or you're going to cause, all kinds of havoc, blah, 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 blah. That shit isn't true most of the time. And it certainly isn't true for kettlebells. You will actually see, hold on, I think I do need to switch my camera. Son of a bitch. Hold on a second. Okay, hey, look, that's me. All right. So if you're looking at this point here where there's contact and you want to keep this centered over the hip, at a certain point, the bell is going to be way out here. In order to keep this point over your hip, you may need to go and change the orientation of the forearm a little bit. So when you get into really heavy pressing, you'll see somebody lean and you'll see the actual orientation of the forearm change. And it's not going to be straight up like that. It's going to be more like that. A lot of that is designed to keep the center of gravity of the bell, the center mass of the bell over the hip. There are a few different ways to do that. There are a few different places that you can move, but one of the most common ways you can move is to actually change the orientation of the forearm. Because again, you know, what I just picked up was a 24 kilo. The lift is going to be significantly different with a 40. Okay, the 40 is going to have enough mass to move that center out, and I'm not going to be able to keep my stance in the same place. I'm not going to be able to apply the same pressure. I'm not going to be able to keep the weight over my hip. So keep that in mind as you get a little bit heavier. You're going to need to overcome different forces. You're going to need to rebalance them. You would be surprised, you know, if you're not going particularly heavy, this may not impact you much, but you'd be surprised at how much, you know, just a single jump up in a kettlebell can make a difference. Let's say a 28 to a 32 or a 32 to a 40, you have a pretty significant difference in mass, and it will shift you. It will throw you off a little bit. Any questions about that concept? Nope. Okay. Ooh, there's something in the chat. Are you reading that, Jeremiah? I don't want to fuck with anything. I already messed up my cameras. This is hard.
It was me. I was just wondering, it's Kawana. I was just wondering about those people that have like issues with shoulder mobility or rotator cuff, like that position, switching the position with a heavier weight. They probably shouldn't even be doing it, basically.
That change in position is actually, it shouldn't do anything to change the position of the shoulder. And yes, if you have a delicate shoulder structure, if you're dealing with impingement or something like that, you're probably not doing the right activity for you. But a change in position of the forearm usually, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but it will usually accompany. You're not just going to do that and push up like that because your range of motion disappears. When you see a change in the position of the forearm, you're going to see the body shift that way. And if you can look here, this space actually opens up a little bit. So you're not going to get less room in your shoulder beyond what a heavier weight might cause in terms of simple compression.
We would just have to be, like, in terms of coaching, we would just have to be mindful of that, right?
I mean, if you ask my opinion in terms of coaching, you should just get someone who's less raggedy and teach them how to press and send someone else to the doctor and tell them they can play with kettlebells when they grow up. But yes, you would have to be mindful of that if that's what you want to do. But yeah, I don't think that you're going to really get any additional compression in there. So, you know, that's what we're really looking at when it comes to the mass of the kettlebell and how that will shift as it gets bigger. Wedging. So wedging is a technique some of you may be familiar with. You hear it a lot with deadlifting, and it's basically the idea of kind of shoving yourself in between or underneath the object, you know, rather than pulling with individual muscles. The goal is to try to put as much of your mass between the floor and the object you're lifting as possible. Okay, so a wedge with the press is a very, very common technique, and you kind of need to do it as you get heavier. You're going to see some lateral displacement. There's going to be a weight if you're going up. There's going to be a weight where you're just going to be too heavy, and you need to move out of the way. Now the question comes up. You know, we could spend easily an hour talking about this, but I'm not going to. You know, that motion can come from a lot of different places, but one of the safest places it can come from is the hip. It's your stance. Now, keep in mind from the first picture, when we saw that red circle, you want to respect your base of support. You don't want to go outside of the base of support. The more you move your center of gravity toward the outside edge, you're going to lose your power. You're going to lose the ability to push that bell up. But if, let's say I'm pushing overhead with my right arm, if I can use my right leg to push my hips to the left a little bit and get my torso out of the way, then once that bell starts to go up, I can use my left leg and kick my torso back underneath the bell. And rather than just the force of my shoulder, I'm actually pushing my entire torso under the bell, and I can get some more power that way. I can get more strength, because I'm using more of my body. I'm using more of my mass to move that object. So wedging can be really, really important. It has to be well timed. If you're too slow in your wedge, you're just going to completely lose your power. When you look back at some of the concepts we covered with the kettlebell swing, let's say the stretch shorten cycle, a lot of the muscles if I'm pushing this way, if I shift that way, a lot of these muscles are going to stretch momentarily and then they're going to contract. So I can even get some more muscle contraction with a very quick shift one way and then back to the other. So again, we want to push up here. We've got a little bit of incline that goes into more biomechanics stuff that we're not going to get into. But basically, rather than coming straight up, you're going to have this incline here. You're going to find that there are very few things that you can do to get the bell from here up to here. So from here to here, this is really just how well timed your clean is. Okay, if you've got a really solid clean and it's dropping into place, as that bell sinks down in your fist, you're going to get some stretch going on through these muscles. Again, we're using the stretch shorten reflex here, that principle. So as that pops down, your arm is going to want to shoot back up. Okay, once you get past here, you can start to rotate out, and then we can come away from right about here. Now, at this point, if you get too far out here or you get too far in here, you're going to have trouble. Remember, the kettlebell wants to rotate on you. So this is really about timing. When you're here, you want to pop that torso using your hip. You want to pop that torso underneath here and wedge it underneath the bell. You want to use your hips as much as possible. If you don't, what you're going to do is you're going to use a lot of spine. You'll probably get the lift, but it's probably going to hurt as well. So keep that in mind. A lot of people are going to give you, like they say with the bench press, which is also not true, like, oh, there's all these shearing loads on your spine. Like, well, that's not what shear is. The kettlebell, in most cases, is not going to have a direct intersection with the spine. So you're not going to cause a shearing load. However, laterally flexing your spine with a very heavy load overhead can cause some problems for you. So just make sure that you try and stay really well integrated, that you're moving through the hips and you shove your torso underneath quickly. If you find that you really need to, laterally flex too much, you're probably handling a weight you shouldn't.
Quick question, Rach.
Yeah.
Does, just so you don't really focus on lateral flexion at the spine, would practicing bent presses help with that, just so you can focus on hips to get the weight up?
That's a good question. Maybe is the answer. You may get more awareness. What I'm kind of mulling over in my head is the mechanics of the lift are very different. So, the basic concept of the bent press is, you're actually, once the arm's overhead, you're actually moving the body underneath, and then you're using your entire torso to lift it up. So, maybe that'll help. It really just comes down to, the individual person. That is an example of wedging. I don't know, your bent press will help many times your overhead press, because you're going to be able to bench press, if you know how to do it, more than you can overhead press. So you're going to be able to handle more weight. So I don't know if there's going to be a direct carryover. One activity should help the other, but I don't know if the orientation is similar enough, and it really is going to come down to, individual learning style. I don't know if they're similar enough biomechanically, but I will say pretty definitively that a good bench press should help a good overhead press. But from my experience, it's a lot easier to learn a good overhead press than it is a bench press. because that's just a weird lift that a lot of people don't really know how to execute. We good there? Yes, no? Okay. So we want to use our hips. Keep in mind that you have some rotation. You have some rotation in the pelvis as well. There are two places where if you're going to rotate at all, you want to try and maximize those. And the rotation is going to happen primarily in your at your hip, so internal, external rotation, and it's going to happen through your thoracic spine. You will be able to make room through there if you need to rotate. That's what you want to do. When we're looking at how movement occurs, most of the time we analyze it in kind of a, an open chain position. So if I've got my arm here, this is internal rotation and that's external rotation. But when you're looking at the lower body, because the legs are fixed, as the entire pelvis moves that way toward the left leg, you're going to be internally rotating that hip. Okay, so as you're moving your legs around, the pelvis around the femurs, you're going to get more internal rotation. So that's another place that you can get motion. If you need motion, you can, if you look at your center. So if you look at my fist, you're going to see as I rotate, my fist is going to move toward the center. So you're going to get lateral travel as you rotate. And if that's the goal, is lateral motion, then you can find some rotation. And it's a safer place to get it from than, the lateral flexion. Again, laterally flexing your spine, it's not going to kill you, but there are other places where you can get it and you can remain a little bit stronger, okay? Ideally, you want to stay as solid as you can in your lumbar area, just because it has the most range of motion in those planes, and it's going to be harder to reverse if you go too far. And that's what I got on there. Jeremiah's going to go over the rest of this stuff. Do I have any questions on any of the stuff I went over?
One quick question in regard to what you just spoke about with the hips. Essentially,
Yeah.
Is it just creating torque with your hips to help assist with heavier bells?
You can potentially create torque, which is not a bad thing. One of the basic concepts of the wedge, there are a couple, but one of the basic concepts of the wedge is if you are going to get, if you're going to create space to make that wedge in, you're going to need to move the body from one side before you can get it back to the other side. So for the internal rotation, it's really more about just creating space. And so if you take my sternum here, right? If I want to wedge that underneath the kettlebell, I need to bring it that way first. And one of the ways that I can bring it that way is with a slight rotation of the hip or with a slight rotation of the T-spine. Again, these are very, very small movements. You don't want to just do that. That's not a wedge. Different people have different wedge technique. But the main goal is to shift the torso out of the way so you can push it back under the bell. And different people are going to do that. I've seen people be very effective with just kind of side bending. It's not wrong. It's just not as safe for a lot of people who maybe don't have that mobility. We've all got different spines. So my main point is if you can use some of the rotation in your hip, if you can use some of the rotation in your T-spine to get your sternum to the other side, then you're going to be able to push it back the other way. And you may be able to create more strength in that position. So less about torque and more just about using rotation causes translation, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. I see a lot of head shaking. They're tired of hearing me talk.
Yeah, tell me about it. All right, so if you have a kettlebell and you want to move a little bit, some of the things Roger talked about, I want to kind of go over a few of those concepts a little bit practically, and then provide a few drills that we can use. One second right here. All right. Okay. All right, so primarily, can everybody see me okay? Good to go? Hi. All right. So I can't see you because I'm using a really tiny telephone to get this so you can see it all. So Roger mentioned having the compression as opposed to the tension, and that is absolutely correct. However, there are going to be times when you're going to want to use your tension. So being that with just starting our kettlebells presses, we're not going to want to take and use every tension that we have. So I want to go over different ways for you to acquire your tension, get to your tension, and use that while maintaining that stacked position that Roger had mentioned, okay? So as with anything, especially the kettlebell, the setup is key. Your clean is going to be important. So you notice when you go into your clean, I instinctively create my stacked position with moving my feet closer together, okay? So I'm not going to stay in this position, even though with this particular weight I've chosen, I can just press it up. It's not as smooth as I like. However, just that simple, moving your feet closer together makes it a better press for me. The compression's there. I'm stacked. My center of gravity is there. Now, when we go into some of those other things he talked about as far as the hips, I can shift a little bit, and hopefully you all can see that slight shift into my right hip to allow an even better position. And that's even easier, okay? So that's gonna set you up in the feet and the hip to get you over there. Now, if you have any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and stop me from talking, okay? So how you get to that, it can be a couple of ways. The stop stance, just like I did, or you can bring it all in at once. Depending upon the press that you're going to do, you may want to bring it all in at once so you're ready, and then bring it together, okay? As you get heavier with the presses, you're gonna feel what that is best for you. I have certainly had my fair share of failures in presses. Tiptoe rage, it took me forever to get the 44 kilo up, and that's not even the weight I have to press to achieve the strong first standard of half body weight, at least not yet. I'm down to 205, y'all, so I'm getting closer. But it requires a lot of this technique that Roger just explained. So if you're not at a max press, then make sure you build yourself up safely with those ladders that we talked about, and we'll do some pressing in our group training in the next 2 weeks, so you'll be able to get a chance to practice that. So that's set up your base support. Now you have your C shape, your press. So you want to definitely go up, right? And you have to turn out. If you take and you turn out too early, and you're using that concept of the way the bell wants to rotate, like Roger mentioned, you're going to end up here with no power. Now you're going to be leaning, and you don't have any power to wedge yourself under the bell because now the bell has won. So that's just a simple example of that, okay? So as I press out, if I start here, oh my goodness, even with a 24 kilo, I already know that this is a trouble zone. See, my natural tendency is to get away from it, to try and jam into it, but that is very difficult. That is the incorrect way. So when you think about your C and you press up, you want to drive up by pushing yourself away from the bell, and as it passes your head, maybe it's usually a good checkpoint, you're gonna wanna turn it to right, okay? How we're gonna find that is everybody, whether you have a bell or not, you can take your hand over your head, okay? And then you're going to pull it down as hard as you can. Notice, like from here, okay, remember, think about our kettlebell press. So when you do that, your hand is gonna be facing out. You're not gonna end your press in what we would consider a neutral grip. You're gonna be in those fingers facing forward. That's where your press will end. So as you pull down, I'm pulling down as if I'm doing a pull up or chin up, if you will, and I'm pulling down. That's gonna groove my press. Boom. That is important. That's an important key aspect to all your presses. The press doesn't just stop when you get to the top. You've got to bring it down, and you're going to need to continue to create and maintain the tension in your body to get you to that point. Because regardless of how heavy it is, it's still heavy. So as I clean into my press, I step in, I'm pressing up. Now, I'm not just gonna bring it down here, no power, especially if you're gonna look to do reps. So I'm going to do just like we talked about. I'm gonna pull it down, and now I'm ready. And you see, I'll even give it the little wedge technique that he was talking about. And I'm driving underneath, okay? So for you, a good practice, pull that arm down, get those lats involved. The strong sister to your press is the lat. Think about, I'm working the opposite to explode with the main direction I want to go. Makes sense? Good? Good, okay. Now, the verticality of the forearm is key. To Kawana's point, she asked a question, is you're gonna be impinged? And maybe it's a little bit easier to visualize what Roger was talking about in regards to that slight, I guess, lean in with that bell when it's on there and it's heavy, because if you're here and you've got a 48 or 40 or 44, it's gonna wanna pull you there. You still need that support. You still are gonna go vertical with it. You're not going to go across. You're not going to go out. The vertical is up, okay? An excellent, and we did this last week, an excellent drill for the vertical forearm. And just nailing that vertical portion before you turn out is going to be the bottoms up press. That certainly is one that I like to use when warming up for any pressing training that I'm going to do. And the bottoms up press is very simple. You use a little bit lighter at kettlebell, unless you're a beast. Then you can use some super heavy stuff. And if you're looking for ways to challenge your press and are tired of the weight you got, or if you really mastered that weight, this is for sure a great way. It can be used in your get up, it can be used in your press. It's important. So what you want to do is you want to take, and you need to get that bell right in that palm of that hand. So kind of like that spot where your thumb is. And you should be able to basically balance on it, lean into it, and then you got a good solid grip, hike it, and clean it. If you can't clean it up, then you can do the cheat clean, get yourself set. Now, the goal is practice, so if you need to do that, do that. Get your feet set, squeeze the grip. So I want you to watch the C shape and the way the direction goes with the bell as far as the verticality. I'm gonna watch it with my eyes the whole way. And then I'm gonna pull it back down using that negative. So in a press like that, you can really see the C. Boom. Okay, so if you have a lighter bell and you wanna practice it. Roger might be watching, I can't tell. And he may be able to take a look at some of your stuff. But do that, get that involved. You can bring it down. If it's too hard for you to stand up and do your bottoms up presses, then go ahead and bring it down to the half kneeling, it's fine, or even now that tall kneeling. Any of these presses, any press you're doing, if you're finding that it's just a little too hard standing up, take the legs out of the equation. Work it more with the core that you got, okay? Now, as far as tension goes, does anybody have any questions with what I'm talking about right there?
I don't have a question, but I want to clarify something.
Please.
The Jeremiah and I are talking about two different types of tension, what I was talking about earlier. So if you look at my stance, I don't know if you guys can see my legs, but you see they're wide, right? They would be outside of, my ideal base of support. The thing that's going to keep me standing up is going to be tension in my muscles, meaning they're going to be pulling. Now, if I walk my feet in and my feet are directly under my hips, the biomechanical concept that I'm using is compression, okay? So that's the kind of tension I was talking about. The kind of tension he's talking about is, think of it like pressure, utilizing internal muscular tension. So some of your breathing, contracting your glutes, your abs, that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion, different kinds of tension here.
Good, thank you, Roger. Crystal clear. Now, the tension you need to make a press is going to be the other tension that Roger wasn't talking about. For example, creating it from the ground up with your legs. If you don't know how to flex your quads, I'm sorry that you're here. But think of it as pulling your kneecaps up, zipping it up, making the quads tight, squeezing your glutes. Oh, this is great. Keeping those abs nice and tight. We don't want our press to have our ribs flare out, even though that may be an issue. Like we said last week, some of my issues were the disconnection. So I've been working on correcting those issues. So if that is your issue, this is going to end up being a weakness as opposed to that tension right there. It is going to involve the breathing. So when you get into your press position and you want to get more out of your press, you're going to have to tense up a little bit. All right. So if you're just here and you're sitting poolside and you're just pressing, I got my open hand, I'm pressing. Oh yeah, this is the weight I can handle. But if it's something serious, you're going to have a problem pressing it. So by gripping with the toes, spreading the floor apart, squeezing the quads, cramping the glutes. I don't want you jamming your hips forward. Okay, just create that tension just enough to where you feel support in your spine. Engage the abs. Okay, and then you have your hand and your hand. As you squeeze this hand, you're ready to go. Okay, boom, and then you bring it down. That's the tension you need. Now, a solid way to find out if you need all the tension in the world is to multiple press. So if you do have your bell with you and you want to press, let's go through this exercise together. Think about a kettlebell that you can press approximately 10 times. All right. For most of you strong people out there, you should know what that is. Because even though we talk about 5 times, you know, sometimes you mess around. You're like, oh, I can press this kettlebell, oh, let's say 15 times. All right, here I go. I haven't even been counting. I'm thinking about it. But now as it starts to get harder, I got to squeeze the handle a little bit harder. You got to tense it up. Ooh, this is hard. Now I'm going to use the tension. Okay, that's not all of it. I can do more. And then that's where you're going to start to create that tension. Now, in order to create a solid max press attempt, you're going to need that. So my first max press attempt, real quick aside, was at the Strong First certification. I'd never attempted a max press. I'm like 24 kilo everything because that's what I got to do. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do my first max press. It was a sloppy shit show. I think Roger may have witnessed it. Possibly Hallie might have witnessed it too. It was very terrible. I didn't do it.
I heard it.
But what I learned, what?
I heard it.
You heard it? That's not unlike me. But what I ended up learning from that experience is that I was in no position to do a max press. One, I didn't even know how to create the tension necessary, which is a great thing about learning. And then fast forward to December when we're doing Strong First 2. It wasn't until after I'd attempted my max press with the weight that I needed to do, which I didn't also get. Remember, through success is failures, everybody. So we get this little cue and it's like, oh, this may help you with your max press. Grip with your toes, spread the floor apart, corkscrew those legs in. Just gonna create that tension in the glutes, and then you're gonna create that tension in the quad. You're gonna crush the grip, and you're gonna hit your abs. Now, the trigger drill that we went over last week is gonna be helpful for this. How do you do it? How can we get better at this? Knowing to time that up. Well, it takes practice. But one good drill for that is like a pause drill. So as I'm here, I'm gonna sit here for about 5 seconds. Feels pretty good, I feel strong. Now I'm gonna create that trigger. I'm gonna wait 5 seconds. Now I'm gonna squeeze and create the trigger. And that feels really strong. It feels a lot stronger than me just trying to just hold the kettlebell. As I squeeze, everything tightens up. Now, the best tip for today that I got away from Roger's presentation was using that weight that's on your bell right there, or that's on your forearm right there. Don't just press up with the handle and the fist, drive into that weight. And I'm almost certain I'm going to press the beast tomorrow because of that tip. So if you're here, ready? Hold it for 5 if you've cleaned it in, and then trigger pull, breathe out, okay? Breathing is important. Don't hold your breath. So when we talk about the breathing, I've got my tension. I've already kind of taken a breath in. I'm gonna breathe behind the shield, if you will. And I'm up. Inhales like come down, controlling it all the way down, okay? All that's fine and dandy. So that's your pause drill. Holding for 5 seconds, squeezing the trigger, right fist, left fist, and driving it up, okay? Now, one of the most important things, if not the most important things, is your press is gonna suck if you don't clean. So we haven't gone over cleans, but I suspect you all have done them a time or two. Practice those and make sure they're good. In my practice today, I was pressing with 36 kilo, and I noticed when my cleans sucked, my presses sucked. So keep your cleans good. So with the clean, using my hips, I'm nice and light. I can get set. I don't need to strangle my kettlebell yet. Then I press. Now, even though this isn't a max press bell, I just want to illustrate some of that wedge technique to drive under. This has been my nemesis for quite a while. So I've got my hip under it. I'm driving up. I'm coming out. Now I need to drive with that left leg to push my body under the belt, okay? Don't just get caught here and be in a tiptoe rage. That's not good. So some things to take away. First, make sure your stance is legit. Don't be too wide. Your press will suck. Get your feet centered underneath you. This isn't a ballistic. You don't have to hurry into this, but remember your power reserve is going to go down the longer you wait. A tip to help your vertical form is going to be the bottoms up press. To help your negative when you pull down, just pull down like you're pulling down something really heavy. When you do your kettlebell press, pull it back down. Get those lats involved. Make those stronger. Stronger lats, stronger press. Have a good clean. Toes. Spread the floor. Corkscrew the legs. Flex the quads. Squeeze the glutes. Abs are on. Trigger the handle. Press it up. Pull it down. Okay? And then rest if you need to. There are many ways to practice the press. You got your ladder style. You have your just like single rep style, 1, and you can do like 1 to 3, depending upon what your program calls for, or you can clean and press it each time. Some easy go-to ways to kind of practice this is to just go ahead and get yourself into a position. Go ahead and swing it, clean it, press it, swing it, clean it, press it. Boom. Now you're focusing on different pieces, bringing the foot in, making sure your clean's tight, and you get an opportunity to move through without just being like, I'm just pressing if you feel bored with your press.
Hey, Jeremiah.
Okay? Yeah.
What weight are you using right now?
24?
So 24 is not very heavy for him. And I want to point out that the speed, the time he's taking to set up his presses is for demonstration purposes. If you wait that long on your press, if you put that much time between your clean and your press with a heavy bell, you are probably going to fail. The advantage that the clean gives you is the force is coming down and it's loading this arm. Imagine it's a spring. If you can really get a solid timing, you get the solid timing down between your clean and your setup for your press, that bell is going to hit the bottom and you're going to be ready to pull right back up. Okay. But don't deliberately take that step unless you're focusing, maybe you're focusing on your stance. He's doing a drill that is really teaching him how to generate tension. Make sure you have the right size bell for this, and make sure you understand that these delays are they're not a necessary part of the press. There's no such thing as a press. Each press is going to be different. Depending upon the weight, depending upon what your objective is, depending upon how tired you are, the goal is to get it overhead. So don't assume that you need to have this long pause in between, because if you're going heavy, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I'll demonstrate what this would be if it was a heavier press for me. But that pause is a drill. So you can pause and then press, and that just kind of helps you get that timing and that lift off. You don't want to rush it either. But this is basically, if I will envision that this is a really heavy kettlebell for me, and I will just show you about my timing for that. So. That's about how long it'll take me. Notice on that, all this practice, because when you go to your max press, you may not be able to swing and clean it up. Maybe you have to cheat clean it. But either way, the position still needs to be the same. But I step in as I clean it, because I do not want to waste time with a super heavy bell finding my foot stance. When I practice that stance move, it's just to allow my brain to understand it, like, hey, boom, now we're in the position to press. And it takes practice with all this stuff. And then it's just right away. The longer, to echo what Roger said, the longer you sit here, picture your cell phone battery is just going to deplete. And then you're going to be grinding, and then you're done. And last thing, don't forget to grind it out, okay? If you have a bell that is heavy, you have not pressed it before, and you're trying to press it, and you get to there and then you stop, you're never going to associate success with that bell. And true story, I watched a guy grind it out for probably about 3.5 minutes for his 44 press. I mean, he just grinding it. He's got his bend. He's ready to wedge under. Finally, he gets it. So grind it out. It's a grind for a reason. You can practice different techniques to get your grind up with pauses halfway, pauses at the top, pauses a third of the way up, or whatever. But grind it out. You will get to your press. Any questions? Solid.
A few things I'm seeing.
On my press?
Not yours. You're fine. Something I do want to point out about vertical is I have not seen a single vertical forearm. So this is vertical, right? If you're completely vertical, the kettlebell is going to pull you into external rotation. Everybody's grabbing the kettlebell and having just a tiny bit of internal rotation and letting it integrate with their body. The vertical refers to the kettlebell, okay? You're not going to be able to keep your arm here. Some people will, depending upon their body type. But with me, for example, if you look at the width of my shoulder, if I keep a vertical forearm, I'm actually going to be outside of my hip because my shoulders are wider than my hips. So I'm going to be in a really weak position. Everybody I saw with a good setup has a tiny bit of internal rotation at the shoulder. The kettlebell is moving just slightly in toward the body, but the where the bell is resting on the forearm is still lined up over the hip. So make sure your path is vertical, even if your forearm is not. Don't obsess over that. Most of the stances I'm seeing are too narrow rather than too wide. I actually don't think I've seen a stance that's too wide yet. So play with it. See where you feel strong. But too narrow is not going to be helpful either. You do want to remember that this is vertical force production. So just like you would jump, you want to have your feet underneath you. But if someone tells you to jump as high as you can, you're probably not going to have your knees touching together. That looks better, Katie.
And Quinn has a question as well.
Yeah. Pull it in, keep it in closer to your body as you're going overhead. Hey, Quinn.
Yes.
What weight, are you trying to do something closer to a max weight, or are you just drilling right now with the kettlebell you're using?
The one that I grabbed secondly, it was more of like, it's max weight for my right arm, but for my left arm, like I can do like fives with it. But for my right arm, it's like a struggle to get up one.
Okay.
So
Because
yeah,
it looks too heavy to be doing the trigger drill with.
yeah. The trigger drill was the pause drill that he was doing. That one.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
You
that
want to
one it
do,
definitely was. And then after I picked it up, you guys explained that that's for not a max drill. So and now it's just working on the timing to get it up faster. I had a
yeah,
question about the vertical forearm though.
mhm.
Are you are you saying like right from the clean? So right when you get into your clean, that it should be straight up vertical right away, or from the clean, at least from like what I've been taught and shown, is land the clean at that diagonal and then you press into it. But are you talking for this particular like exercise and for you guys, do you want to end the clean vertical?
So I've never seen a successful press with any kind of weight completely vertical. So
Okay.
don't worry about vertical being here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Worry about vertical in terms of your bell path. Now, what you do want to make sure of
Okay.
though is that your arm isn't here unnecessarily. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that you're not going any direction other than up. So if your force is directed straight up, then you're fine. Okay. That's what you want to focus on. Now, you also don't want the bell to be too close to the chest. Now, I can't really tell from here, but it looks like you're catching it a little bit close here. And this is not a drill. If let's say you're doing a rack, let's say for a squat or something, and
Mm-hmm.
resting the bell here is going to be pretty efficient and it's going to integrate well into the body, but you're going to be pretty weak from this position. Remember, the bell wants to twist you either in or out. So I would rather see, you're still going to have a little bit of a diagonal, but the bell is not going to rest on the bicep. It's going to rest on the forearm.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So it looks like in order for you to go straight up, you have to go out and then up. Whereas
Okay.
you should be going up and out at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you.
But you know, if you guys are ever in doubt, why we break things down this way is we give you some basic ideas. If you understand the basic concepts, you can break down the skills and figure out what the right path is for you. Okay. When I was watching Quinn and I was watching Jeremy, they were pressing at the same time and it was more pronounced. Their shoulders are a different width. So I saw a different angle at the forearm. One wasn't wrong. They were both right, actually. It's just that one has wider shoulders than the other one. So if you have this one size fits all approach and you're either coaching yourself or someone else, you're like, oh, your kettlebell's got to be here. You're putting someone into a weak position. And if I'm your client, I fucking hate you because you're not letting me push anything heavy over my head because I've got these tiny little girl hips and I've got broad shoulders. So if I've got a vertical forearm, then I'm way outside of my hip and I'm going to push, you know, if I'm lucky, I'm getting a 24 overhead rather than a 44 or a 48. So, you know, the goal is to take this information and process it and say, well, wait a second, how am I interacting with gravity? What is actually efficient rather than just saying it needs to look like this, or that. Some of the best people in this, Brett Jones has a really great article. A lot of his articles actually talk about not doing this whole one size fits all training. If you guys want to do more reading, go to Strong First and look up basically anything that guy writes. But it's the same concept. So, you know, how do you stay efficient? That's what you want. How do you keep the belt path vertical over the hip, regardless of the forearm? Okay.
yeah, practice lighter first before you try and go heavier. Really plan it out and make sure that you're doing what we suggested last week in the programming. If you want to analyze it and then drill it and then reinforce it, don't just take your word for it without even looking at it. Okay. Anybody else? Everybody feeling good? Happy pressing? All right. So there's some stuff to work with there. If you want a copy of what we went over today, just send me a message and I'll make sure you get it. Next week, we will be doing we won't be doing a PowerPoint presentation. We're actually going to be doing some training together, an opportunity to get some of this work in, put it all together. Roger and I are happy to look over. And if you're a coach and you want to try your coach's eye, that may be a helpful opportunity for you as well. So I'll make sure that if I have your email address, which is everybody here, hopefully, I will make sure to get you the invite to next week, and we'll go for it. You know, we'll start with swings next week and help answer some of the questions you have, looming with like, is my swing right? Am I doing this? Did I get the shift down correctly? All this fun stuff that we went over a couple of weeks ago, and then the following week we'll go through this press one. But if you have an opportunity, again, go ahead and film yourself a video, message it to me or email it to us, and we're happy to take a quick look at it for you. Don't go at this blind, and you know, we welcome it, and you know, appreciate you guys taking the time to learn. Does anybody have any questions before we go?
Well, I have one more. If you guys need to fuck off, go ahead. Is anybody stuck on weight? I know kettlebells are hard to come by. It's like kettlebells and hand sanitizer and toilet paper. Is anyone, I know Jeremy's having a hard time with some weight. Is anyone else stuck? Like, does anyone need heavier shit to push overhead and they can't find it?
Yeah, I'm with that. I need that.
Okay, do you guys have extra weight or extra kettlebells? Okay, so stacking. You guys see me okay?
Yeah.
So this is, what is it? I think it's Perfecting Your Press. It's a decent book that some giant Scandinavian dude wrote about pressing. Right now I'm going to use 2 bells. This is one of the techniques you can use. I have tiny hands, so this is not the greatest thing for me. I can get a couple bells up, but this is not great for me. But what you do is that. Okay, it's a little tricky to clean. You've got to stack them. It's definitely a good grip challenge, but it's one way to get more weight over your head. It's a lot harder. Another way is to basically just take another kettlebell and chains, straps, whatever you have by the bed for bondage, just strap one kettlebell to the other kettlebell and you should be good to go. You will get a lot of play though. So I really like the stacking method, especially like I know Jeremy does all kinds of weird calisthenics and bodyweight stuff, so could be good for that. But that's all I got. So otherwise, you just have to wait and order another kettlebell. Any questions on that?
Cool. And you can always make stuff harder by going slower. All right.
Yeah, there's that too.
There's lots. But everybody, I hope to see you guys here. Both Roger and I look forward to next week's training together, a little swing practice. And again, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn from us. And yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Raj.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Good to see y'all. Peace.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.